This is one of the most hyped up seasons in the history of Nebraska football, and nothing has been talked about more than the first 7 games for the Huskers. Many people consider this to be the easiest season opener schedule in the history of Nebraska football. So in today's video, I'm going to make my official predictions on how Nebraska starts off their season, but not only that. We're going to talk about how this will impact Matt Rhule's tenure in the future of Nebraska football as they try to make the Big Ten championship in college football playoffs. So really quick, we have a jam-packed episode today. Make sure to smash that like button if you're getting excited about the 2024 season. I know I am. Along with subscribing to the channel if you want to stay up to date with everything Nebraska football, Nebraska recruiting, Nebraska rumors, anything related to Nebraska throughout this offseason, I have you covered. But without further ado, let's jump right into it, talking about the Huskers and their opening schedule. And man, oh man, it does not get easier than this. Again, it is looking very easy in those first 7 games. And when I was actually researching for this video, I was looking at the last time we had a super easy first 6, 7 games, and it was 2016. And if you're not familiar with that season, we started off 7-0. After those first 7 games, we were actually ranked number 6 in the country. Everybody was hyped up around Nebraska. And we're not going to talk about how we ended that season, but let's just start it off with 2024 now. This is the first time we've had a super easy schedule in a long time, and we got to take advantage of it. So I'm going to run through the first 7 games really quick. Some quick points about each team and go over whether I think we're going to win or lose. So starting off, first game of the year at home against UTEP. That's going to be a victory for Nebraska. UTEP went 3-9 last year. They have a brand new head coach. Matt Rhule does not lose to Group of 5 teams. He does not lose to FCS teams. He will take advantage. Nebraska will become 1-0. Pencil that down. Number 2, one of the most hyped up games of the year. Colorado comes to town, comes to Memorial Stadium for a primetime night game, 6:30 on NBC. And man, oh man, this is a prove-it game for Matt Rhule. It's a prove-it game for Dylan Raiola. And on the other side of the football, it's a prove-it game for Deion Sanders and his program. Obviously, he beat Nebraska last year in Boulder, but they ended the season losing 6 games in a row. They went 4-8 on the year, and they've had a complete roster overhaul. Everybody has left their program. They have a bunch of new players coming in. It's going to be a completely new team that Nebraska is facing this year, and they have got to get this victory. Now, I probably predict the point spread to be Nebraska by about 4.5, 5.5 going into this matchup, and I do think Nebraska wins this one. The fact that it's going to be a night game with 90,000 inside Memorial, Shedeur Sanders, Deion Sanders, they have never been in an environment like this. They're not going to be able to handle it. Nebraska gets the victory. We start off 2-0. Let's take it to the next week. Northern Iowa comes to town. 3 straight home games to start off the season. They're an FCS club, and they're not going to get the win. Again, like I said, Matt Rhule does not lose to FCS teams. Northern Iowa, one of the better FCS teams. They have a lot of really quality players who get drafted, who end up transferring to higher levels. But yeah, they were barely 500 last year. Matt Rhule is too disciplined as a head coach to let this one slide. So Nebraska starts off 3-0. But here's where it gets interesting, folks. And here's where Nebraska has struggled in the past. Big Ten West opponents. Illinois, our former Big Ten West foe. Obviously, the Big Ten West no longer exists. They come to town, and they went 5-7 last year. Brett Bielema, their head coach, he has given us problems. In his first ever game with Illinois, they beat us pretty badly. And obviously he was the coach at Wisconsin before then. He basically never lost to us there. So he's been really good against Nebraska, but we shouldn't forget the fact that we actually went over to Champaign last year and won with Heinrich Harburg as our quarterback on Friday night. So again, we beat them last year. Matt Rhule's 1-0 against the Illini. I like the fact this game is at home, but that's a toss-up in my opinion. The fact that we have struggled against Illinois in the past. Nebraska, they're very good at losing games they have no business losing. Okay, every single year in the offseason, we pencil these type of games in as W's. Oh, Illinois, that's a W. Purdue, that's a W. Northwestern, that's a W. And time again, we lose to these teams. So I am going to tentatively put this as a win, but that's a game where I could see Nebraska drop just because Matt Rhule, he's lost to teams he shouldn't lose to. He lost to Michigan State last year. He lost to Maryland last year. I could see him dropping this one at home. So going on to our fifth game, Purdue on the road. Now, Purdue has been a hot mess. If you follow them at all last year, this offseason, they've lost their entire roster. They went 4-8 last year with a brand new head coach. Now, with that being said, they actually added a lot of players to the portal. They have one of the best cornerbacks in the portal entering their team. They have a 5-star recruit coming in the secondary. So their defense is actually going to look pretty good for the Boilermakers. Obviously, their head coach, Ryan Walters, he is a defensive-minded coach. So I expect that defense to actually give Nebraska and Dylan Raiola some problems. But that offense is not very good. Hudson Card, quarterback 1, should be no problem. But I will say this once again, Nebraska struggled against Purdue, and more specifically, they have struggled in West Lafayette on the road. So a game that I could see, unfortunately, Nebraska dropping just because of the fact that we're not a good road team and we're not experienced against these Big Ten West teams getting W's in the past. But we'll see. We will see. On to Rutgers. This is the hardest game, in my opinion, that Nebraska has in this opening stretch. Now, too many people do not give Rutgers respect. Rutgers has made a bowl game in the last 3 years. Last year, Rutgers won 7 games, and they're progressively getting better. Greg Schiano's a great head coach. He's completely rebuilt the Scarlet Knights. With that being said, however, I feel really good about this game being in Lincoln. If this game was in Piscataway, I would probably have Nebraska losing without a doubt. But the fact that we play them in Lincoln, it's probably going to be an 11 a.m. game. That's going to be big for Nebraska. That's going to be big for Matt Rhule. But I will say this about Rutgers. Their new quarterback, if you're not familiar with their roster, is Kaliak Manis. He was the quarterback for Minnesota last year. He beat the Cornhuskers in Minneapolis, and he also beat Nebraska in 2022. He actually came in the second half of that ball game to replace Tanner Morgan and came back from a 10-0 deficit to beat Nebraska in Lincoln. So this guy is 2-0 against the Cornhuskers. In the words of my man Justin Adams there at the Nebraska Voice of College Football channel, he is our kryptonite. So I'm very worried about playing him. This is a game that, unfortunately, I think we're going to drop. So I'm going to predict this as a loss for Nebraska. So those are the first 6 games of our schedule. The first half. Let's get to the last game in the first 7. And this is Indiana. Again, another hot mess program in the Big Ten. They went 3-9 last year. But with that being said, they have a completely new coach. Their coach is coming in from James Madison, one of the best Group of 5 programs in the country. He's a real deal. And then they also have a completely new roster through the transfer portal. They have a brand new quarterback by the name of Curtis Rourke, who comes from the MAC. He was the starting quarterback for Ohio. Looking over his film, nothing really that we should be concerned about. But again, it's just a testament to how they've changed up their roster. They could be a completely new team. We're actually playing that game at Indiana. But with that being said, we're going to beat Indiana. I feel good about that. So yeah, first 7 games for Nebraska. Recapping that first 7. Only 2 teams that I just talked about went over 500 in 2024. That being Rutgers and Northern Iowa in the FCS level. Every single one of them besides that were under 500. They didn't make bowl games. A lot of them have brand new head coaches. Very easy starting 7 for Nebraska. Best case scenario, 7-0, obviously. Worst case scenario for Nebraska, if everything goes wrong, if Matt Rhule just botches play calls, botches the time management, in the fourth quarter, if Dylan Raiola has some of that freshman fatigue that may or may not happen, I expect us to potentially go 4-3. Those losses include Colorado, Rutgers, and then one of the games that we probably shouldn't lose, whether that's Illinois, whether that's a Purdue, whether that's an Indiana, we'd probably, worst case scenario, go about 4-3. So that's still a good thing. 4-3, you'll take that every single day of the week. I mean, what was the last time we started 4-3? Obviously, besides last year, it's been a very long time for Nebraska. But man, I mean, that's a really, really easy starting 7. And my prediction overall, I think we start 5-2. I do think we drop the Rutgers game, and I think we're probably going to drop one we shouldn't lose, whether that's the Colorado game, whether that's Indiana, or whether that's Illinois. But let's get into the real talking point here. Okay, I've made my predictions, and I'll probably talk about it more as the summer goes along, about that starting 7. But why is this so crucial for Nebraska? Well, there's multiple reasons. Obviously, in 2016, when we started off 7-0, we were a top 10 team in the country. Okay, if this happens again, Nebraska will absolutely be back in the top 10. It's going to put Nebraska back on the map, but more importantly, there's going to be so much hype around this program. There's multiple reasons why that hype is so important. Number one, NIL. The boosters, once they get into it, the money starts flowing in the program. We start to have more money for recruiting, more money for facilities, more money all around, not only for football, but for basketball, for volleyball. The NIL is only going to benefit from actually winning football games. Number two, recruiting is going to go haywire. Nebraska has had multiple 4-stars and 5-stars commit to them without having a winning season. If they start off the season 7-0, can you imagine the hype around Nebraska going into that 8th game of the year, playing Ohio State, all the recruits getting into it, showing love on social media, visiting Lincoln? That's going to be ridiculous. And we're going to land a bunch of 4-stars and 5-stars because of it. Number three, the fan power is going to be ridiculous. You thought Nebraska's fan base has been obnoxious the last couple years. Can you imagine how crazy they're going to be when we actually start winning football games again? We're going to be traveling to these away games in droves to finish the year. When we go over to Ohio State, there are going to be 20,000, 20,000 Cornhusker fans who make that trip. It's going to be ridiculous, and social media is going to be going crazy. My channel is going to be going crazy, and that sets us into the fourth big reason why this would be huge for the program, and this is just the last 5 games. Okay, we have a hard schedule in the last 5. We play Ohio State, USC, UCLA, Wisconsin, and then, of course, our rival Iowa to end things off. That's a tough 5, but the hype is going to be wild. You've already clinched a bowl game. You're in the mix for the college football playoff. You're in the mix for a Big Ten title. The Dylan Raiola hype would probably be through the roof if you started off undefeated. Man, that's just going to mean good things for this program, for Matt Rhule. It's going to benefit all aspects. And that last 5, dude, it's just going to be super fun to be a Nebraska fan. But here's the message, and this is something I want to end off with. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, because a lot of times we do this where we predict the schedule and we say, oh, Nebraska's going to go 8-4, and we start talking about games that are in November or October. We have to take this one game at a time. My mindset, it's on UTEP. It's on Colorado. Those first 2 games, I'm only thinking about those 2. I'm not thinking about Iowa last game of the year. I'm not thinking about starting 7-0. I'm thinking about starting off season 1-0 and 2-0. Okay, take it one game at a time. Enjoy the process. Enjoy the season. Because a lot of times when we're too focused on the future, we don't enjoy what's happening right now. So take it one game at a time. Let's not sit here and actively predict we start 7-0. Let's predict that we win every single week leading up to 7-0. So that's my message. Take it one game at a time. Enjoy the ride. It's going to be a fun season. So if you made it this far in the video, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. Comment down below, guys. What do you think is going to happen in those first 7 games for Nebraska? You think we drive a couple? Do you think we start undefeated? What do you think Dylan Raiola performs? Man, there's so much that can be talked about. Let me know in the comment section. And as always, folks, I'm going to end you off with this. Go Big Red, go Matt Rhule, and see you in the next one.